Hey, this is Dale Wiley, and this is the second part of my interview with Brian Henneman from the Bottle Rockets. So Brian, when you made the Brooklyn side, which was your second album, that was actually supposed to come out on Eastside Digital. Is that right?
Right, and it did. It actually did. That one came out in 1994 in the fall.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And in fact, I remember having you and Tom Parr over at my apartment and drinking beer and talking about Carlene Carter and about this amazing producer guy who had just basically opened up the world for you because he had told you to drink wine instead of beer on a certain track.
Right. Wine, Spanish wine for rockabilly songs.
But soon after it was released, then Atlantic started calling. Tell me how that happened.
That was one of those deals where it was like, another one of those roots rock scares. It was like all of a sudden all the writers were talking about it. It was like going to be a big thing, and all the major labels were like signing up their bands, like it was Warner that got Uncle Tupelo. Right. And I really think Atlantic was the only one that didn't have one. Uh-huh. And so they were, hot on they were late to the game with it, but they were still looking for one. And they discovered us, uh-huh. somehow along the way. And so they worked out a deal with Eastside Digital. They actually licensed it from them for 7 years. I don't know the technical details of it, but anyway, it ended up being an Atlantic record. Uh-huh. It started out as Eastside Digital, but then Atlantic took it over later. Right. And then we went on to make another record for Atlantic, and that's as long as that lasted. But that one was like Eastside Digital, and turned into Atlantic along the way.
And when all of that happened, you got some additional push on the radio. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah. Atlantic had like the radio guy. It was like, so that's when I learned how it all worked. It's like, I'm not going to like pull the beard off Santa Claus here, but I learned how it worked. And yeah, it was like boom. We were on the radio when it first happened. It was pretty shocking. It was like, we were, and they sent it to rock radio, right. And they were putting it on the stations that played AC/DC and stuff, and right. And you would hear it. The first time I ever heard it, we were in Pontiac, Michigan, and I had the radio on in the van, and I heard "Ain't Talking About Love," and then right after that was over, Radar Gun came on, and I was like, oh my God! It was like that scene in That Thing You Do. It was like it's going to happen. We're going to be famous, and it was the most requested song on Dallas's biggest rock station. It was doing great, and big things were happening. We were flying all over the place from one radio convention to another, meeting all these people, playing like these little 3-song gigs in weird little places for radio conventions all over, like Atlanta one day, Boulder, Colorado the next day. Just it was like a jet-setting kind of time. And then the Atlantic Records decided to close down the division that signed.
Oh wow.
So it was like the plane blew up on the ascent. It was like we were going up and rising, and then boom. It was like not only did they when they shut down the division, everyone, it was like they were just completely gone. So yeah, it was like poof, boom, and the instant that it was shut down was the instant it went off the radio. It was just like out of gas. You're done. Boom, over. Uh-huh. But we were still under some sort of contract to them, so we had to sit around and wait to see what they were going to do. Are they going to drop us? What are they going to do? That took forever. It was like we had to wait for months and months and months and months, seeing what they were going to do. And they finally decided they were going to just keep us and bump us up to like Atlantic proper, you know. Okay, now you get the same logo as Aretha Franklin on your records,
right?
You know?
Right.
and believe it or not, I realized that nobody there knows who the hell we are. You know, it's like all of a sudden we were just like these inherited, you know, kids from somewhere else dumped into the big old machine. And I've always like been more of a fan of being a big fish in a small pond kind of a thing.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I just it smelled like failure to me. It was like, and we went ahead and they let us make a record, which turned out to be 24 hours a day.
Right.
Which was a very weird thing because it was major label budget, and we were basically doing the same stuff we did before for $5,000, except now everything costs like $250,000. You know, it's like an aspirin in the hospital. It's like it's a major label, so everything costs more, and they spend more. And there was like these phenomenal amounts of money being thrown around, and like nobody from the record company was like calling in to check up on us. You know, it was just really kind of crazy and fishy, and the whole thing seemed completely weird. And we managed to make the record in the middle of it. You know, it didn't freak us out too hard to not be able to get that accomplished. So then we made 24 hours a day, and then we had to see what they were going to do with it when it was finished. And that took a long time. You know, it's a major label. It was like things just go slow, you know, and it was like, so we didn't know what the heck they were going to do. And at this time, this is when we started making dumb mistakes, was around this time. So now we're on Atlantic. We got the major label. We figure, okay, we need bigger management. We need a bigger booking agency. And, you know, we sort of had a little clout to do it at that time because Brooklyn had done so well, and we were on Atlantic. Talked to a lot of guys. I talked to Dave Matthews, manager, on the phone. You know, I thought there was a lot of guys that were interested at that time. And we ended up going with this guy, Mike Renault, who I met, and he was the guy I liked the best of the guys I met. He was out in L.A., so we got him. You know, he immediately got us on the John Fogerty tour. You know, it was, you know, things were kind of moving forward. But then we hooked up with the CAA, which is the biggest booking agency there is. After the Fogerty tour was over, we couldn't get a gig. It was like, you know, they wouldn't return clubs' phone calls. I was having clubs call me at my apartment to try to book us because no one from CAA would call them back because, you know, they want 10% of a $250,000 gig. They don't want 10% of a $1,500 gig. It's the same amount of work. Right. There we were on a major label with big time manager, and after the Fogerty tour, we could not get a damn gig. It was crazy. It was just insane, and the whole time was insane. It's like when 24 Hours a Day came out, it was like it was released in the middle of the nationwide UPS strike. None of the towns had the new CD. It was like we didn't have it. Nobody had it. It was like this chronic. It was almost like Spinal Tap-ish in a way.
Well, and in the middle of that, or in the same era, speaking of Spinal Tap-ish, you had the famous puppet incident. Oh yeah, that was probably was that then, or was it a little earlier than that? I think that was a little earlier than that. I think it was too. Yeah, that was. Tell us about that. Oh yeah, that was our publicist got us that gig in New York. It was some morning show that was I don't know what. Right. Was it? I don't even remember. I don't know. Yeah. Very early morning show. And we were going to go on and sing a few songs. We had played a gig in New York City the night before. And it was like we had to be there at like 5 o'clock in the morning for the show. With the gig in New York, it was already 3 o'clock in the morning, so we weren't going to go to bed. So we just, you know, kept drinking and stayed up, and then we went to the show and we sang a song, and then all of a sudden there's like it's like a morning zoo radio kind of vibe, like all around us. Right. You know, and there's like a puppet, you know, there's a little friggin' puppet, you know, like over my shoulder. And I just had it. It was like I cracked. I just got up and left. And we just walked off live television, and it was
it was, you know, it was kind of a big deal for a while with certain people, but, you know, we survived it in the long run. The host of that show, I didn't even know who he was. It was Tom Bergeron.
Okay.
Who's now Dancing with the Stars dude. So anyway, he was the host, and you know, I guess the cool thing about it is when we walked off live TV, they replaced us with Dennis DeYoung, who happened to be in town doing something on Broadway. So I don't know. It was crazy. That was typical of the era that time. Right. You know, drunken foolishness.
Well, at least you caught the tail end of that kind of rock and roll stuff. That's an awesome thing to have been a part of. How did you get on the PBS thing, the Mississippi River of Song?
I think it was a guy. It was the guy who actually filmed it. What was his name? I can't remember his name anymore. But somehow he got a hold of us, and I don't know how he found out about us. I can't remember. It was so long ago. But they totally came to us, and they were doing like it was a pilot film to get the funding to make this thing. And so we were one of the first things he filmed, and he actually got the funding off of what he filmed off of us. So it was a successful venture.
In the middle of it, you've got the great quote, "I call it rock and roll, everyone else calls it country." And isn't there a little bit of that just goes a long way in the way that you kind of viewed your songwriting and everyone else does? I mean, isn't that a little bit prophetic?
I think so. I really do think so.
Because I hear you more. I mean, I hear you as a very good pop songwriter as well as anything else. And I mean, it has country overtones, but you know, Eric Gamble always says that he felt like he was hearing Fleetwood Mac when he heard "I'll Be Coming Around." Yeah.
I mean, you know, that stuff is in there. I've always loved that kind of music, so it runs deep in there. All that, you know, pop rock music of the 70s. You know, it's like I love that stuff. Right. So but you know, I also love, you know, Waylon Jennings. I also love Ronnie Van Zant. You know, I also love the Ramones. So it's a big mix that's hard to figure out what it is, and it's been hard to sell for over 20 years.
Well, it has its crests and valleys. It has some points. When they did the reissues of your first two albums a couple of years ago, what did you see out of that? How did that feel?
That was great. That was like really, really something that it took that long to get the rights to the first two records back because they were just lost in like legal mumbo jumbo because the first album, because Eastside Digital actually went out of business. Right. And they still had our first album, and then Atlantic had a license on the Brooklyn side for 7 years, but by the time the 7 years was up, Eastside Digital was out of business. So it like ended up in like Atlantic's possession with like this unclear kind of ownership kind of thing to it. And it took, you know, we never really had the money to chase it down, you know, and didn't even know if it would be worth it, especially not later over the course of time as the internet came along and started making albums. It seemed to be like a little bit of a crazy idea, you know, because people weren't really buying CDs anymore. Finally, we just got them back. It was pretty simple in the end. It was kind of like our lawyer sent them a letter that said, "We're taking it. If you have a problem, contact me by this amount of time," and they never did. So it just you know, it was this big long ordeal that just ended as nothing. And then we got them back, and by this time we had signed with Bloodshot Records, and we took them straight to them because it was just, you know, a thrill to like actually have our first two records back. They were lost forever. Yeah.
Well, and you know, it seemed to get a great response. There was a lot of press around that, and it seemed like. Do you think that kind of greased the wheels to the success of the new album?
It couldn't have hurt. It couldn't have hurt.
The new album has essentially had the best response of any since the Brooklyn side. Isn't that right? Yeah. That
is very, very shocking and very, very a very happy thing. You know, it's like I'm so happy that it did good. It's just like.
And you've kind of chronicled online your different approach to songwriting.
Well, there are several major differences with this record that I don't know if they attributed to the success of it or not. You know, it could just be have nothing to do with it. But there are several huge differences. One, it's the first album we ever made where I am a writer on every single song on it. And sole writer on a lot of it. You know, there's only a few co-written songs on this record. And so that is completely unusual. It's never happened before. You know, I always had like songs with at least with Scott Taylor involved. Right. And then always like I probably never had more than 3 or 4 of my own songs on any one album at any given time. Right. And it was, you know, that's the way it always was. And then we would have Bob Parr songs we would use. We would have, you know, songs Mark would come up with. And it just happened this time that, you know, we're older now. Everybody's got, and just nobody had the stuff. I was the only guy that had it. And I had enough to make a record out of, and it had been so long since we made a record that everybody was, you know, excited to do it. So it was, so just by default, because everybody was so dying to make a record and was so distracted in their lives and kids and all the stuff that we didn't used to have, they were not only thrilled to make a record, they were perfectly happy that I had written all the songs. It was like, and you know, and I'm always nervous about that. I don't want that to be the case. It just happened to be the case this time. And I like the songs, and everybody in the band seemed to like the songs, and so that's the hugest difference of this album. Is it's you know, it comes pretty much solely from my viewpoint.
Tell me, going a little back in time, tell me what caused Coffee Creek.
Good question. I'm sure alcohol. I'm sure it was a drunken idea, you know. It was the Uncle Tupelo guys plus me, and we were, you know, I'm sure we were listening to a lot of country music at that time and probably just thought we should make a country band. And I think it was Jay that came up with the name Coffee Creek. I don't know. We had like these running jokes of, you know, country and coffee and all this stuff. It was just one of those things that just popped up, probably sitting around a table drinking somewhere.
Yeah, there was. I get to attend a couple of those shows, and that was really. I mean, those things were rock shows and country shows at the exact same time.
Yeah, we couldn't help it. We were trying to be country, but it just never seemed to work out.
Was there ever any talk about recording that together, or?
Nah, that was very much just a fun, you know, off the clock side project. That was just purely just for fun.
We were just lucky to be there.
Yep.
I just have a couple more questions for you. How much of your songwriting is influenced by the guitars you're playing at the time? Is there any difference between the Fender days or the Rickenbacker days?
It's influenced hugely. It really is, truly. And it's funny that 98% of all songs I've ever written have been written on an electric guitar, not an acoustic guitar. You know, it's like hardly ever do I write a song on an acoustic guitar. Always an electric, and I never was able to write a song on a Peavey. It was like when I had Peaveys, no songs came out of those guitars. It was like I'd have to pick up a Telecaster to make it happen. Really? It was just like they were too workmanlike. It was like trying to write a song on a Black & Decker drill or something. You know, it was like I couldn't get. They worked great on stage, but they didn't really inspire me to do anything when I'd play them around the house.
What
Telecasters did.
What made you go through the TV stage?
That was a political move.
That is the exact answer that I wanted.
It was actually my shot towards patriotism after 9/11.
There you go.
It was like when 9/11 happened, I was, you know, freaked out like everybody else, you know. Right. And pretty much the day, it was like I just trying to sort out what the hell just happened, and it wasn't like might have even been the very next day after it, that I started thinking, I need to play like the most American guitar there is. And I tried to think about what that is compared to what I could afford to buy, you know?
Right.
And it was like all of a sudden, like the light came on over my head. It's like, holy crap, it's a Peavey. You know, it's got to be an old Peavey, and I can totally afford it. And then that just, you know, blew up like an exploding cigar. It's like I was getting them so cheaply that it was ridiculous. It was like the Peavey years. It was crazy. I had 9 T60s. I was getting these things for like $80 and $90 a piece. It was I couldn't pass them up. I felt like I was saving them, you know. It's like they're having a little abandoned life in a pawn shop. There's another one. I'm going to take it home and give it a good life. And I ended up with so many. I ended up with so many of those big plastic Peavey cases. They were what was running me out of the house, not the guitars. I actually had one too many. I didn't have a guitar to go in it, so I actually just threw one away. I put it in the dumpster because I was like a Peavey millionaire. I had every damn model they made. I had every kind of amp. It was stupid.
Well, but then you met your true love in a guitar in your Rickenbacker.
Oh yeah.
How did that come about?
I had one 20 years ago. It was, you know, I always wanted one, always. And I finally got one years ago. It was when the Brooklyn side was blowing up. And we were out on the East Coast, and Tom Parr, I couldn't get a credit card in those days. I had nothing to go by, but Tom Parr could. And he got a Sam Ash credit card. And we were in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. And at that time, a brand new Rick 360 was $699.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. So he let me get it on his credit card, and it was a 1-year same as cash deal. So I had one year to pay it off, which I thought I could do. Turns out I couldn't, and I had to sell it. But I kept it for the full year. But I loved it. It was like it immediately influenced my songwriting. That is the reason that like songs like Gravity Fails, you know, have like a different kind of music than anything we'd done up, and stuff like and like I Want to Come Home was written on the Rickenbacker. It was like I immediately knew that they helped me write songs. And then I got rid of it. I had to sell it, you know, 1 year after I got it to pay Tom Parr off. And then I never got another one. It was like the years just went by, and I always wanted one, and I would deny them and tell myself that I don't need one, and I would get every other kind of guitar except that one. It was like a great denial. I could never come up with the money for it. I was always scared that if I would get it, I'd have to sell it again, you know, and it was like. And then, you know, 20 years later, the opportunity came, and I got another one, and bam, you know, the same magic happened. The song started flying out of the damn thing. So it's like somewhere in the great guitar cosmos, it's like it is my perfect zodiac match or something.
Tell me this. If you were, you know, if somebody came up to you, they didn't have any kind of idea of who the Bottle Rockets were, tell me if you were making them a mixtape, 5 or 6 songs that you'd make sure to put on there.
Wow, that's a good one. Just so they'd know who the whole band was. Yeah, right. So let's see, 5 or 6. You would have to put $1,000 Car on it. Right. That would have to go on there. You probably would be smart to put Get Down River on there.
Right.
Then you could put God, what else could you put on there? Oh man, there's too many songs to do. Let me see, what else would I would definitely do something off the new record for sure. Put it on there. I'm not sure which one. Something. Oh man, this is a really hard one.
Well, I'm going to take one off your hand because I'm going to put Ship It on the Frisco.
There you go. That'd be a good. You know what? That would be a good one. That would cover some ground there. And man, what else? You know, you could put. Oh God, so many. I guess you could put Indianapolis if you wanted to. I don't know if that's one you'd want to, but man, what else? Good Lord. I mean, you'd have to put something really, really kind of heavy on there too, whether it be like Brand New Year or Alone in Bad Company or you'd have to kind of show like what you're getting into somehow.
Yeah.
And then you'd need something kind of quiet too. Man, it's too hard. This is why nobody can figure out how to sell our album. It's like every song is false advertising.
Well, maybe that's something you can think about for a different day, but I sure love the new record. I sure love the old records, and
thanks.
It's just exciting to get to, see you guys have such a good run with the new record.
Yeah, that is exciting. I'm so excited about that.
Well, thank you, Brian. Thank you for us having you on. I appreciate that. Visit me at dalewiley.com, buy some books, subscribe to the podcast, and throw money. Copyright 2016.